What is up, everyone? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we will be reacting to why F1 will miss Daniel Ricciardo. This video is gonna make me cry. Okay, it was announced a couple of days ago that they've booted Danny Ric from RB and Liam Lawson will be replacing him for the final 6 races of the season. That makes me cry. No joke. I should have recorded my raw reaction to seeing the news, because honestly I sobbed, and that's not even an exaggeration. Like, when he left at the end of 2022, he obviously got to race the entire season at McLaren, and then got to Abu Dhabi, and I have Snapchat memories of just me crying watching his post-race interviews in Abu Dhabi of 2022. It's so sad. And I vowed to myself, I was like, I can never go through that heartbreak again. And here we are, 6 races to the end of the season, and he's been booted already. Do I think he should have had a seat next year? I don't know. But it wasn't even like he was extremely underperforming to his teammate either. There were a lot of problems with the car in itself. So many points that come into play here. I just don't think, like a lot of people, he deserves a proper send-off for a man that's been in the sport for 13 years. The man that's got over 8 Grand Prix wins out of the 70, I think it's 777 F1 drivers there's ever been. Only 33 of them have won 8 or more Grand Prix, and he fits into that 5%, and you're telling me that we've just booted him mid-season? No proper send-off. It's wrong. So that in itself made me cry alone, and then I saw the news a couple of days ago and I sobbed, and then I was just sobbing the next day afterwards. It felt like going through a breakup. It was worse than going through a breakup. It's that kind of heartbreak is too much for me, as my favorite driver is Danny Ric. It's really heartbreaking. So all of you are requesting these videos about Daniel Ricciardo, and I'm sat here thinking, I don't know if I'm going to make it through all of them. The last one I did, I thought I was going to stop through it, but it was kind of stating the reasons why he might not be in the rest of the season, and so it's kind of a bit of a debatey reaction. This one is literally called Why F1 Will Miss Daniel Ricciardo, so I think it's going to make me cry. So warning, disclaimer, I'm going to be crying, but I am looking forward to the video. But before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe. Over half of you that watch my videos aren't subscribed. Just hit the bell, it takes 2 seconds, and if you'd like to become a member on this channel and receive exclusive perks, you can also do that by hitting the join button down below. The sad music, I can't. I'm too emotional for this week. My eyes are welling already. I need to get it together.
12th of July 2017. The British Grand Prix is just a few days away, and to celebrate, an F1 live event is going on in London. Every Formula 1 driver's there, apart from #blessed, who was too busy apparently. Anyway, at the end of the event, all of the drivers are told to get into their blacked out cars and drive off, not to interact with the hordes of fans amassing nearby. They all did this, besides one, Daniel Ricciardo, who I watched tell his security to off as he ran towards the crowds. I chased him down the street that day, and holding my phone out, mine was the last one he took, snapping this picture before turning around to the crowd behind me and shouting, "I'm sure he can send it to the rest of y'all." I never did, but a lot has changed since then. I've gained an extra chin or two, but Daniel Ricciardo remains one of the most beloved drivers to ever grace our sport.
Yeah.
So here's his story.
Oh no. I'm already gonna cry. I need to actually get it together. Sorry. 1989. A lot of great people were born in that year.
Australian parents, his father was an avid racer, and thus inspired the young honey badger to
Look at how young he looks. His face literally hasn't changed.
2005. The same year, he would transition to Formula Ford, but found himself racing in an uncompetitive 15-year-old chassis. Ayrton Senna might like that number, but realistically, finding any form of pace out of that thing was going to be a challenge. So when Danny Ric took that heap of rust to P8 by season's end, a few heads were already beginning to turn. 2006 saw another step up, this time to Formula BMW Asia, which from these photos appears to be what happens when you ask ChatGPT to come up with a racing series. Fighting against the likes of a young Earl Bamber and a bunch of names I'll be honest, never heard of, Ricciardo's consistency would see the Aussie never finish a race outside of the top 5, picking up 12 podiums and a pair of wins. He finished third in the standings come the end of the year, attracting the attention of a certain energy drinks company and paving the way for a promotion into Italian Formula Renault for 2007. Now part of the Red Bull Junior Academy and in a field containing...
The fact that he's stayed with Red Bull the entire time, crazy.
There was no race wins this time, not even a podium, but Ricciardo still managed to end the year 6th and scored 6 times the points of his 2 teammates combined.
Wow.
This set him up for an assault on the full Euro Cup series the following year, and boy, did Ricciardo deliver.
Did he now? The intense music.
5 poles, 6 race wins, missing out on the title by just 3 points at the end of the year.
Just 3 points.
Further dominance would be expected the following year in Formula 3. It wasn't a stellar field, obvious when you realise Alpine's new team principal managed to score points. So at a bare minimum, we were expecting Danny Ric to fight for the title. Except there wasn't a fight. 6 more in the win column, and another consistent season saw Ricciardo dominate the championship. 87 points clear of his nearest competition. That meant
Of course he dominated.
taking part in the post-season test in Abu Dhabi and walking away with the fastest time.
Wow.
Granted, this wouldn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but with the main team tasting championship success with a fellow junior called Sebastian Vettel, many were keen to see if said success could be replicated. It's perhaps a little confusing then that
I know, the fact that we're losing now, a lot of the greats, there's only a couple legends left on the grid at the moment. Fernando Alonso, I don't think he's ever going to leave. And Lewis Hamilton.
Daniel deserved a promotion to Toro Rosso for the 2012 season.
Yeah.
That meant sacking off their existing drivers, Sebastian Buemi being confined to eternity in Formula E, and Jaime Alguersuari turning into a f***ing DJ for some reason.
What? That's crazy.
Jean-Eric Vergne in the Toro Rosso. While the Honey Badger wiped the floor with the Frenchman throughout their time in the junior categories, this
His face literally hasn't changed.
that was about as competitive as a kickboxing paraplegic. The duo occasionally needed some luck, or Romain Grosjean to fall on their side or to pick up points.
You can always count on Romain Grosjean.
Both drivers would still be retained for a second season as teammates for 2013, however, and this time with a slightly more competitive car, Ricciardo began to come into his own.
Of course he did. Am I surprised? No.
There was also the matter of what was going on in the main Red Bull team, with a domestic going on between Vettel and teammate Mark Webber, as well as swirling rumours that both were in potential talks to go to Ferrari for 2014. Now with hindsight, it appeared that Ferrari were talking to pretty much everyone, even the pastor over here, but there was a genuine concern that soon Red Bull might need a new face to lead it through the turbo hybrid era, and the announcement of Webber's retirement at the end of the 2013 season meant the outfit now had a big decision to make. Both Vergne and Ricciardo were standout drivers, but as time went on, the Honey Badger looked more and more like the ideal candidate. He hadn't done anything particularly special in his 2.5 years in the sport, but his consistency and edge over Vergne in qualifying, as well as his highly regarded technical feedback, made him look like the more attractive option. From a marketing perspective, Daniel fit the bill much better as well. The 24-year-old exuded positivity and charisma.
And he still does. There's literally pictures, after his interviews in Singapore when he was crying, then he was smiling leaving the paddock. I'm how are you still so positive?
The team that had utterly dominated the past 4 years of the sport, except it turned out that had come at a cost.
Oh, did it? I didn't start watching until 2017, so...
Regulations, both on the aero and power unit side of things, and Red Bull's engine supplier Renault really underestimated that challenge. And by underestimated, I mean they were f***ing embarrassing. With all their focus on winning the last 4 championships with Vettel, relatively little effort went into the manufacture of the turbo hybrid power units for the new era of Formula 1. Some boys over in Brackley, meanwhile, had done the exact opposite, and since 2010 had been busy.
They dominated like there's no tomorrow.
An Adrian Newey designed chassis was perhaps the only thing saving this dog of a car from falling outside the 107% rule. Vettel in particular grew to enjoy it about as much as one enjoys a colonoscopy. Ricciardo, meanwhile, with a lot to show and nothing really to lose, got to work. Round 1.
Of course he did.
Australia, Q2.
Let me guess, he dominated.
Had enough pace to outqualify a Caterham, but it's still out of the top 10 shootout. Daniel Ricciardo, meanwhile, is 300ths off a Mercedes in the lead. The wet weather and Kimi Raikkonen's impression of Black Swan might not have helped that, but Ricciardo was quick to prove this was no fluke, as he went to provisional pole in Q3 beating Nico Rosberg's Mercedes by half a tenth of a second. Pole in his home event,
in a struggling Red Bull as well, that's impressive.
Despite dropping behind Rosberg at the start, held P2 until the flag, taking a memorable debut podium before a few irregularities or the Honey Badger disqualified from proceedings. Even so, the Aussie had just put himself on the map. Ricciardo would be back on the rostrum later in the season at the Spanish Grand Prix, his consistency shining through, meaning he was there if the ever-dominant Mercedes cars ran into a problem or themselves. The 2014 Canadian Grand Prix was a prime example of this. Qualifying 6th on the grid, Ricciardo fought through the pack, and when the pair of seemingly indomitable Mercs hit trouble...
Again, am I surprised? No.
Removing his 2 retirements, Daniel finished outside the top 5 on only 3 occasions, ending the season 3rd overall in the standings, 71 points clear of the man everyone expected to whoop his ass at the start of the year.
Wow.
No longer the top dog, Red Bull's fears over Vettel leaving would become a reality, as the Germans...
Oh yeah, he moved to Ferrari, didn't he?
15, and well, yes, he never tasted championship success in red. He would leave Red Bull...
That seems like such a big move now. Like, I couldn't imagine a Ferrari driver now moving to Red Bull. Even though we've been talking about, like, Sainz moving to Red Bull. He's been at Red Bull before, so it didn't seem like that big of a deal when the rumours came about. But could you imagine, like, Charles Leclerc turning around and going, yeah, I'm signing with Red Bull? That would literally throw me off completely.
This was a rather weird part of F1 history where people tend to forget Red Bull were a big fan of this young Russian driver, being fast-tracked through the junior formulas, then spending a year in Toro Rosso alongside Verne before the Frenchman's Frenchness saw him...
I was going to say, he just popped up out of nowhere.
A return to form was needed for 2016 then, and a run of 3 consecutive 4th place finishes to start out the season looked to be a sign of things heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
But come the Spanish Grand Prix, Red Bull would make a decision that would alter Ricciardo's career forever. So remember that time.
Is it the Max coming into Red Bull?
His replacement at Toro Rosso for 2015 was a young hotshot called Max Verstappen.
Isn't it? So,
and with the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes showing significant interest in the Dutchman's services, Red Bull needed to promote him to the main outfit as early as possible. When Kvyat turned his home Grand Prix into a military parade, the outfit saw their opportunity and took it. Daniel Ricciardo now had a new teammate, and really, this was like 2014 once again. Verstappen wasn't expected to challenge Ricciardo right out of the gate, yet that's exactly what he did. Mercedes going nuclear and Red Bull conveniently putting...
Depression starts now. The rest of this reaction, I'm just going to be crying.
...crossed the line to take victory in his first outing for the Red Bull racing team. Some will argue that Red Bull deliberately staged the strategies for that fairy tale beginning, but that wouldn't matter. Ricciardo had been rumbled for the first time in his F1 career. The Honey Badger wasn't going to back down without a fight, however, returning to the next race in
Not Monaco 2016.
Verstappen turned his Red Bull into an experimental third chicane in the swimming pool section. Come race...
This is where they fucked up his pit stop, isn't it?
Strategy would end up dropping the ball. As at his final pit stop, his mechanics forgot the rather important ingredient of new tyres and allowed Hamilton to swoop in to take the victory. This loss was hard to take, losing 2 victories in a row after the winless drought of 2015.
Yeah, that's got to be really difficult.
But the Red Bull was still no match for the mighty Mercedes duo of Blest and Brittany. That was until Malaysia. On lap 39, we were in the typical position of Hamilton being light years out front and the pair of Red Bulls squabbling over the final places on the podium. Ricciardo was narrowly ahead of Verstappen on much quicker tyres, but the Honey Badger wouldn't be going quietly. Daniel held on with some brilliant defensive driving through the second sector of the lap. Many might have yielded the position by this stage, though Daniel had the bit between his teeth, remaining ahead in second place in a race which, just 2 laps later, was about to be turned on its head.
What? I was going to say, because he won this race, didn't he?
Germany and pillows of smoke rising up into the air don't often bring back nice memories. And for Lewis Hamilton, this was where many deemed the championship to be over. The guy in second place, however, couldn't have cared less about that. And to inherit that race lead was Daniel Ricciardo, the Honey Badger coming across the line to take his first win in over 2 years and make up for some of the missed opportunities at the beginning of the season. Oh, and with that, we got the shoey and the start of a long line of celebrities that will never risk gracing an F1 podium again. That win would help Ricciardo end the year 3rd in the overall standings, 52 points clear of Verstappen. But their first full season as teammates would be the big test in who would take that outfit into the future. Ferrari had spent the 2016 season being particularly Italian, though come the new era rules for 2017.
I wonder if Danny wasn't so, like, because his whole point is he only wanted to stay with Red Bull and, like, junior team and stuff. If he wasn't so into Red Bull like he was, I wonder if he would have maybe looked to Mercedes or Ferrari. Can I imagine Daniel Ricciardo in Ferrari? That's crazy.
Vettel's brain to do the same thing, but moves like this three-man overtake into turn 1.
Baku 2017 is my fave race ever. Love it. Such a good win. He moved from like 18th to 1st on the grid.
To 5th in the standings. However, it did little to quell the fears that the Dutchman was still seen as the team's long-term future, and the Verstappen-Ricardo rivalry was about to turn ugly in 2018. Red Bull found themselves that year with a much more consistent front-runner of a car. Problem was, Verstappen was taking said car and throwing it into anything he could find. A clumsy move on Vettel in China threw away a potential shot at victory.
Oh, look at that shot. When they spin out in sync, it looks so cool.
Monaco allowed for Daniel to take a second pole around the tight streets there in 3 years.
He won in Monaco
With
as
Red
well.
Bull's hopes now riding solely on the Aussie, the Honey Badger did everything right off the start, controlling the lead until his
An iconic win. Moment in history.
Ricardo lost his MG UK. That meant he was down 160 horsepower, with a very angry German staring right up the Aussie's prostate behind.
The fact that he was able to fend them off, though, is crazy.
Monaco, when the cars were boats, so maybe this was the only place Daniel had a fighting chance. For each of those 50 laps, Daniel held on to the lead, defending like his career depended on it. And at the time, maybe it did. Exactly how he held on to take victory was almost beyond everyone, but the pains of 2016 would finally be washed away in what is arguably one of Ricciardo's best drives in Formula 1. The Honey Badger was on cloud 9, but thanks to events 2 races earlier, his loyalties were already being tested. F1.
Yeah, don't remind me.
You can see where this is going, can't you? On lap 40, with just 11 to go,
Verstappen
moved over in the braking zone.
I hate watching that footage.
Fan fictions will say Ricciardo pegged his younger teammate, and either way, the pair were out on the spot. History has been kinder to Daniel on this one, with the majority now appointing blame to the under-pressure Verstappen. That wasn't how things went down at the time, however. Team boss Christian Horner refusing to appoint blame to one driver and shielding Max away from the media backlash. For Ricciardo, this went down like a hot cup of diarrhea. The Aussie was beginning to see a shift in the team's long-term intentions, and it was a picture that didn't have him at front and centre. There were also concerns about Red Bull's switch from Renault to a Honda power unit for 2019. At the time, these concerns were rather valid, given all Honda had achieved since their grand return in 2015 was having turned McLaren and Fernando Alonso into a glorified meme. In hindsight, this concern aged about as well as, well, one of my recent videos. It was a particularly pivotal time, as Daniel's contract ran out at the end of the season. With no avenues open at Ferrari or Mercedes, many expected him to stay put. I mean, voluntarily deciding to leave a front-running outfit was almost unheard of. But Ricciardo did it anyway. On the 3rd of August...
Could you imagine if he just didn't leave Red Bull and he stayed? Things would be so different now. I'd be so happy right now. I wouldn't be having a mental breakdown right now.
I've seen several people mark Ricciardo's switch to Renault as the beginning of the end for his career. I personally disagree with that point, while Daniel wasn't fighting.
I was going to say, because he was doing well in Renault.
And end the championship 5 spots ahead of the German in 9th in the standings.
5 spots ahead, that's crazy.
The field had closed up. Ricciardo felt more in tune with the car and had what I would argue is his second best season to date behind 2014.
Wow, that's a big statement.
Ricciardo scored 2 podiums and only fell outside the top 10 on 3 occasions. He entered the year 5th in the standings ahead of both Ferraris.
5th in a Renault, that's impressive.
Would agree to part ways with Renault at the end of the season, which hadn't even started yet by this point.
Yeah, after he left Red Bull, it was just one hoop, jumping from one hoop to another, like...
And best of all, Daniel wouldn't be working for this prick anymore. The start of 2021 was filled with trepidation then.
2021 was good for McLaren, and their car was just shit in 2022 and 2023 until, like, Silverstone. Not until this year that they really, like, dominated again.
And the problem begins to present itself.
Like, whenever I think about 2021, I just think about the Monza 1-2 that McLaren had.
What he needed was a stroke of luck, and he was about to get it. The Autodromo de Monza suited the McLaren cars perfectly. Ricciardo beating Norris in the sprint to line up second for the race behind old teammate Max Verstappen.
Because Max and Lewis decided to just race into each other.
Happened in that race, and yet many assumed that Verstappen bonking Hamilton on the head was what gifted Daniel the race victory. In reality, the pair were never ahead of the McLaren. and Daniel managed the race beautifully to come across the
Yeah,
line
he did.
and take what ended up being his last race victory in Formula 1.
Oh my. That just gave me chills. His last race in Formula 1. Ouch.
More top fives to close out the year sets a promising trend for 2022. Except Danny was about to leave again, both metaphorically and, as it would turn out, literally as well.
Stop with the intense music. I'm going to start crying. I know where this is going. Can we just not talk about 2022, please? Please, can you just skip it? Do we have to talk about it?
In the second half of the year, they'd looked to have made great strides on the competition, but as a new season rolled around, they were back to being dog shit. Never was this more apparent than at the beginning of 2022. The ground effect rules had just come into force, and the Papaya army were on the back foot, with a car even more alien to the Honey Badger than ever before. Once again, Norris dealt with those issues better, and while Ricciardo still had a year remaining on his contract, McLaren were looking for a way to push the Aussie towards the back door. A crash in practice for the Monaco Grand Prix appeared to be the crunch point for Ricciardo's stint in Orange. By the summer break,
when they asked him, is the car okay? And he said, I'm okay. Like, that really sums up McLaren and Daniel's relationship there.
total by the end of the year, and it really looked as if it was all over for the Honey Badger. But all was not lost. Daniel wanted to remain on the F1 grid, and really he had three options here. Option one was to take up Gunther Steiner and Haas's offer for a race seat alongside.
Even if he didn't go to a big team, if he just stayed, if he went to Haas for a little bit, like, I wonder what that would look like.
Ricciardo was back with one mission in mind. The 2023 Hungarian Grand Prix saw the Australians' triumphant return to the sport, in a move that, if successful, could see the Honey Badger go back to his former seat alongside Max Verstappen in the main team. Things went well out the gate, beating new teammate Yuki Tsunoda on his return, but just 2 races later, we know what happened. At the time, no one realised quite how significant this crash was. Ricciardo would be out for a few races, and as a replacement was just some Kiwi Marco's singular eye hadn't begun to consider for a full-time race seat.
Singular eye.
Kiwi, however, was Liam Lawson. He was about to impress. Lawson.
Like, could you imagine if there's so many what ifs here, but if like Danny didn't break his wrist there and he carried on, we wouldn't have seen Liam Lawson in the RB, and maybe there wouldn't be all this like iffiness.
Shown some good performances in 2024, but his scrappy start to the season painted the picture the media have stuck with from then on in, when Red Bull denied an option to promote him over the summer break and proceeded to lose the...
I just don't get why they've kept Perez though. Like, that's the one thing that doesn't make sense to me. Like, even if they weren't going to put Danny back in the Red Bull, they need to change the second seat in Red Bull. Like, why is Perez still there?
A lapse, not actually knowing if they'd be his last or not. But this is Formula 1, and more specifically Red Bull. Daniel knew what he was signing up for back in 2023, but Formula 1 has lost part of its sparkle in these last few days. The title of...
Lost part of its sparkle. Oh my god, I'm crying.
...to the sport, a genuine personality, one that was magnetic to anyone who knew him and broke the mould of the typical stone-faced robots who graced the grid when he joined back in 2011. Take the comments from drivers and the media around the Singapore Grand Prix. Take the outpouring of love from the fans when Daniel scored that final fastest lap and driver of the day. This is a man who has brought so many on board to the sport and played a huge role in making it as successful as it is today. We have a lot to thank Daniel Ricciardo for.
Yeah. I'm crying.
From a career move perspective, maybe things in hindsight don't look so great, but I don't think I'd be as invested in Formula 1 today were it not for Daniel Ricciardo.
Me too.
Thank you, mate.
Where to begin? Okay, video in itself was absolutely amazing. I loved it. Going from like the beginning of his story to the end. I'm gonna cry. There's like so many things here that should be talked about, but if I start talking about them, we're gonna be sat here for about an hour. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what this sport is gonna look like now without Danny Ric. He just said that. I know that the sport has lost its sparkle over the last few days because, you know, Danny's not here anymore. I need to actually contain myself. I don't know what it's going to be like. Where his future leads, I don't know either. I've spoken to a couple of you guys, like when I've been streaming and stuff, and we've been talking about Danny Ric, because obviously the rumours have been going everywhere. And we said we'd like to see him. I wonder if he'd ever go over to NASCAR, because he obviously loves NASCAR. And I feel like he'd enjoy it over there. So I wonder where his future's going to go, what he's going to do. I hope this isn't the end of his racing career in general. If he does decide to come back to F1 in a different seat, if he'll ever move away from Red Bull, who knows. I'm actually intrigued as well. I know Red Bull have said that they're keeping Perez until the end of this season, and I think they said that they signed him for another season next year, but I wonder what will happen after that. You know, like who will go to Red Bull, what the rest of Perez's performance is going to be like for the final 6 races of the season. That will be interesting, because obviously Red Bull are now behind in the constructors, because they literally have Max Verstappen getting them all the points. So I don't know where that's going to go either. But anyway, video itself was really good. So with that being said, if you have any other videos that you'd like me to react to, drop them in the comments. I'm working my way through everybody's suggestions at the moment. If you did want to check out any of my other socials or become a Patreon member and get early access to videos like this, then you can do all of that down below. And if you want to become a member on this channel and receive exclusive perks, you can also do that by hitting the join button down below. But I hope you enjoyed today's reaction, and I will catch you next time for the next one. Bye.